What if a single act of kindness changed your entire life? What if one moment, one decision could turn the course of your future forever? Sounds like a fairy tale, right? Well, this is the story of a poor boy who saved the life of a billionaire's daughter. And what happened next will surprise you. Meet Alex, a young man from a modest background struggling to make ends meet, but always willing to lend a helping hand to others. He's no hero, just an ordinary guy with a heart of gold. Then there's Sophie, a billionaire's daughter, who lives a life of luxury, surrounded by wealth and privilege, but feeling a sense of emptiness that money can't fill. Two worlds completely different, until fate steps in. In this video, you'll discover how a simple act of bravery changed everything for Alex and Sophie. What happened when their paths crossed, and how did a poor boy end up winning the heart of a billionaire's daughter? But here's the twist: this story is filled with surprises, challenges, and lesser-known facts that you probably haven't heard before. We'll show you how real love isn't about money or status, but about courage, kindness, and fighting for what truly matters. Stick around till the end of this video, because trust me, you won't believe the unexpected turn of events that brought them together, and how their love story changed both of their lives forever. This isn't just a love story. It's a lesson about hope, perseverance, and following your heart, no matter the odds. Welcome to Craze TV, where we bring you heartwarming stories, unforgettable moments, and a little bit of inspiration to brighten your day. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our amazing community. Trust me, you won't want to miss the incredible stories we have coming your way. Let's dive into this unbelievable journey of love, courage, and destiny right now. Alex and Sophie lived in completely different worlds that seemed miles apart despite living in the same city. Alex was a boy with big dreams, though life had never been kind to him. He spent his days working long hours in a small cafe, trying to make ends meet and support his family. Despite the struggles, there was always a warmth to him, a kindness that made him stand out from the crowd. Whenever someone needed help, whether it was a stranger or a neighbor, Alex would offer his hand without hesitation. It wasn't the wealth that defined him, but his heart. The boy was far from rich, but his generosity and compassion made him wealthier in spirit than most people around him. Sophie, on the other hand, lived a life that most people could only dream of. With a family fortune that spanned generations, her life was one of luxury and comfort. But no matter how beautiful her mansion was, no matter how many expensive dresses filled her closet, Sophie felt trapped. She had everything money could buy, yet something was missing. The smiles she gave at social events were often just for show, hiding the emptiness that lurked beneath. She was sheltered constantly under the watchful eyes of her family, never really able to make her own choices. Beneath the surface of her perfect life, Sophie longed for something real, something genuine, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there had to be more to life than wealth and status. Alex and Sophie, two souls, so different in their outward lives, had never crossed paths. Their worlds were separate, and their lives seemed destined to follow their own courses without ever touching. But both were searching for something they hadn't yet found. For Alex, it was the chance to make a better life for himself and his family. For Sophie, it was the search for freedom and the opportunity to feel truly alive. Neither knew that fate had already set their paths on a collision course. It happened on a rainy afternoon, the kind of day when the streets were slick and the world seemed a little darker than usual. Sophie had been out for a drive, escaping from the suffocating walls of her family's mansion. She had been feeling especially restless that day, as if something was calling her to break free, even if only for a few moments. She took the long way, driving through parts of the city she rarely visited, her thoughts consumed by the chaos of her life. In the midst of her distraction, she didn't notice the slippery road beneath her tires, nor the car that skidded dangerously close to hers. The moment the tires lost grip, everything happened in an instant. A screeching sound, a sharp jolt, and then the car crashed into a nearby guardrail. Sophie's heart raced as the airbag deployed, leaving her disoriented and shaken. She tried to unbuckle herself, but the seatbelt was stuck. Panic crept in, and the world around her seemed to blur. She could barely move, let alone call for help. The accident had left her trapped vulnerable, and for the first time in her life, entirely out of control. At that very moment, Alex was walking down the street, his mind occupied with the usual thoughts: how to pay the rent, how to fix his bike, how to get through another tough week. He hadn't planned on being in the area, but fate had a different plan. As he rounded the corner, he saw the car's crumpled frame, the smoke rising from the engine, and the figure inside struggling to escape. Without thinking, Alex rushed toward the wreckage, his heart pounding in his chest. The noise of the rain and the chaos around him faded as he focused solely on the task at hand. He yanked open the door with all his strength, his hands trembling with adrenaline, and saw her Sophie trapped, her face pale with fear. Without a second thought, he reached in, carefully guiding her to safety, ignoring the danger of the situation. The car could have exploded. The roads were slick, but Alex didn't hesitate. All he saw was a person in need of help, someone who could be saved. He pulled her from the wreck, his mind not thinking about the consequences or the fact that he was risking his own life. He was simply doing what came naturally, acting out of kindness, out of bravery, out of a deep-seated belief that people are meant to help each other. Sophie, stunned and confused, didn't even have time to thank him. She could barely comprehend what was happening. All she knew was that in a moment of crisis, a stranger had saved her life. Sophie sat on the curb, still trying to catch her breath, her mind racing as she processed what had just happened. Her heart was pounding, but not just from the shock of the crash. The realization of how close she had come to disaster hit her, and the image of Alex pulling her from the wreckage rushed to the forefront of her mind. He had been a stranger, someone she had never met before, yet, in a split second, he had risked everything to save her. She couldn't understand it. As she looked at him standing there, his clothes soaked from the rain, his expression calm but intense, she felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude. She managed to find her voice, her words shaky. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." Her voice trembled, and for a moment it was hard to find the right words. He had saved her life, yet there was something more in his eyes, something that made her wonder, why had he acted so selflessly? Alex, though clearly exhausted from the effort, simply shrugged, offering a small, humble smile. I couldn't leave you there," he said, his voice steady but quiet. Anyone would have done the same. But Sophie wasn't convinced. She had grown up surrounded by people who acted out of duty or obligation, people who were always calculating their actions. But Alex wasn't like them. He didn't care about what he could gain or how people might see him. He simply acted from the heart, without hesitation, without fear. She searched his face, trying to make sense of the disconnect. He didn't look like someone who expected anything in return. His clothes were worn, his face weathered, but his eyes held something she couldn't quite place. "Why?" she asked softly, almost to herself, but loud enough for him to hear. "Why would you risk your life for me, someone you didn't even know?" Alex paused, as though the question had taken him by surprise. He looked down for a moment, as if searching for the right words. I guess because it was the right thing to do." He seemed almost uncomfortable with the idea of being thanked. For him, saving her had been a natural instinct, not something to be praised. Sophie felt a stirring inside her, something deep and unfamiliar. She had always been surrounded by people who had their own reasons, money, status, favors. But Alex was different. There was no agenda behind his actions, no expectation. As she looked at him, an unfamiliar feeling started to grow in her chest. It wasn't just gratitude, it was admiration, respect, and something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time, a spark of connection. Despite the vast difference in their lives, despite the worlds they came from, there was something undeniably real between them, something raw and unspoken. Sophie didn't fully understand it yet, but she knew she'd never forget this moment. It was as if the act of saving her had somehow bridged the gap between their two very different lives. Over the next few weeks, Sophie found herself thinking about Alex more often than she expected. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was something deeper, something real. She reached out to him not out of obligation, but out of curiosity. She wanted to understand him, to know why he was the way he was so different from the people she was used to. They started meeting for coffee, at first just casual chats in quiet cafes. But it wasn't long before their conversations grew more personal. Sophie was fascinated by the simplicity of Alex's life. His world wasn't filled with lavish parties, expensive cars, or the pressure of high society. He didn't care about impressing anyone or living up to some image. He worked hard, helped others, and lived day by day with a genuine kindness that made her feel, for the first time in a long while, like she was seeing the world through a clearer lens. Sophie would ask him about his childhood, about his dreams for the future, and he would share stories about his family, his struggles, and the moments of joy that had kept him going. She listened intently, learning about the quiet strength he carried, the sense of duty he had to his family and friends. In return, Alex began to see Sophie in a new light too. Behind the designer clothes and the perfect smile, there was a vulnerability he hadn't expected. Sophie opened up about the weight of her family's expectations, about the suffocating pressure to always be perfect. She spoke of how she had been raised to follow a path that had already been laid out for her, to marry the right person, to always look and act the part of the perfect daughter. Alex was struck by how trapped she felt, how her life of privilege had come with its own set of chains. It wasn't the life she had chosen, but the life that had been chosen for her. As they spent more time together, their bond deepened. They weren't just two people from different worlds anymore. They were friends, confiding in each other, sharing pieces of themselves they hadn't shown anyone before. Sophie began helping Alex in small, subtle ways. She'd buy him a coffee when they met, even though he insisted he didn't need it. She'd help him with finding work opportunities that could ease his burden. Alex, on the other hand, helped Sophie in ways she didn't expect. He encouraged her to be herself, to step away from the perfect image her family expected. When she felt overwhelmed by the pressures of her life, he was there to listen, to remind her that she was allowed to dream, to choose her own path, even if it meant disappointing some people along the way. Their friendship was becoming a safe space for both of them, a quiet refuge from the chaos of their lives. Alex gave Sophie something she had never known. She needed freedom from her own expectations. And Sophie, in turn, gave Alex a glimpse of a life where he didn't have to fight so hard to be seen, a life where someone cared for him without wanting anything in return. They were changing each other slowly, but surely, with each conversation, each shared laugh, and each moment of understanding. As their friendship grew stronger, so did the whispers around them. Sophie's family and friends began to notice her spending more time with Alex, and it didn't take long for them to voice their disapproval. Her parents, particularly her father, were the first to speak up. "You're associating with him," her father asked one evening, his tone sharp with disbelief. "He's not like us, Sophie. He's not someone who can offer you the life you deserve." Her mother, though more reserved, shared the same concerns. "You could be with someone from our world, someone who understands the responsibilities that come with your last name." Sophie felt a wave of frustration. She had hoped that her family would understand, but the judgment was immediate and harsh. To them, Alex was nothing more than a poor boy from the other side of the tracks, someone who could never fit into their world. They saw him as a risk, a complication to the future they had already mapped out for her. Sophie couldn't understand why they couldn't see beyond his social status. What mattered to her was his character, his kindness, his ability to see her for who she truly was. But to her family, those things didn't matter in a world where appearances and wealth were everything. Meanwhile, Alex found himself grappling with feelings of insecurity he had never experienced before. He had always known that his background was different from Sophie's, but he hadn't expected the judgment to hurt so much. At first, it was just a quiet voice in the back of his mind. "She's from a world you'll never be part of." But now, with Sophie's family making their disapproval known, that voice grew louder. He started questioning whether he could ever be enough for her. He wasn't wealthy, he didn't have the connections, and he had no fancy title to offer. All he had was his heart. But was that enough for someone like Sophie? The more he thought about it, the more he doubted himself. He began to pull away, not wanting to be the one to drag her down, to be the reason for the tension in her life. He saw the weight on her shoulders, the strain in her eyes when they talked about their relationship, and he couldn't help but wonder if she'd be better off with someone who fit into her world. He wanted to protect her from the backlash, from the judgment that had started to follow them wherever they went. Sophie, on the other hand, was struggling with a different kind of pressure. She loved Alex, but every time she faced her family's disapproval, it felt like a piece of her was being torn apart. Her mother, her father, even her closest friends, all looked at her with confusion and concern. "Are you sure about this?" her best friend asked one night, her voice filled with doubt. "You're going to throw away everything you've worked for your future." The words stung, but Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't the ones who truly understood her heart. They didn't see the connection she had with Alex, the way he made her feel alive and understood in ways no one else could. But it wasn't just her family. The pressure from society was relentless. They didn't fit the picture-perfect image of a couple. Alex wasn't a polished, well-to-do gentleman from the right circles. He was just a guy who had lived a different kind of life, one that didn't include expensive vacations or grand parties. He wasn't the type of man her social world expected her to be with, and that reality weighed heavily on Sophie. How could she make them understand that her feelings for Alex were real, that love didn't follow the rules of class or money? The tension built between them, unspoken, but always present. Alex, feeling insecure and unworthy of her, began to pull back. Sophie, on the other hand, fought harder to stand by him, trying to balance the love she had for Alex with the expectations of her family. It was becoming clear that their love, though strong, would be tested in ways they hadn't anticipated. The tension between Alex and Sophie had been growing for weeks, neither of them willing to fully confront what was happening between them. Alex could feel the weight of his insecurities pressing down on him, the fear that no matter how much he cared for her, he could never be enough. He'd seen the disapproval in her family's eyes, heard the judgment in her friends' voices, and each time it chipped away at his confidence. He loved her deeply and completely, but he couldn't shake the feeling that their worlds were too different, that their love wasn't enough to overcome everything stacked against them. One evening, as they sat in the park, where they had first shared so many quiet moments together, Alex couldn't hold it in anymore. He looked at Sophie, his heart pounding, the words on the tip of his tongue. "Sophie," his voice faltered for a moment, and she looked at him, sensing something was different. "What is it, Alex?" she asked softly, her eyes filled with concern. He took a deep breath, gathering all the courage he had. "I don't know how to say this, but I need to be honest with you. I love you. I've loved you for a while now, but I don't know if I'm the right person for you. I'm not from your world. I can't give you what your family expects, and I'm scared that one day you'll realize that I'm not enough. I don't want to hold you back, Sophie. You deserve everything your family wants for you, everything they think you should have." Sophie felt her heart ache as she listened to him. She had never seen Alex so vulnerable, so unsure of himself. It broke something inside her, because she knew what she had with him was real, but she also knew the pressure that surrounded them. She had been struggling with the same fears, the same doubts, but now hearing him admit his feelings made her realize just how much she had been avoiding the truth. She took his hand, her voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "Alex, I've been scared too. Scared of what everyone will think, scared of disappointing my family. But what we have is real. I'm not going to pretend that my life is perfect or that I have it all figured out. I don't want the life they've planned for me anymore. I want to live on my own terms, and I want to be with you. You make me feel like I'm truly seen. No one else makes me feel that way." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy and full of meaning. Alex looked at her, a mixture of relief and joy flooding through him. For the first time, he saw the courage in her that had always been there, even though it had been buried under the weight of her family's expectations. He saw her desire for freedom, for something real, just as he had been craving it too. Sophie squeezed his hand tighter, her eyes searching his. "I've been fighting this, fighting the way I feel about you. But I can't do it anymore, Alex. I'm not going to let anyone tell me who I should be with. Not my family, not society, not anyone. I've fallen for you, and I want to fight for us no matter what." Alex's heart soared as he heard her words. The fear that had held them back for so long began to melt away. It wasn't about their social status, their differences, or the judgments of others. It was about the connection. They shared the love that had grown between them despite everything. He didn't need to be perfect, and neither did she. They had each other, and that was enough. "So what now?" he asked, his voice soft but determined. Sophie smiled, a genuine hopeful smile that made her look more at peace than he had ever seen her. "Now we do whatever it takes to make this work. We fight for each other, for what we have. We fight for our love, no matter how hard it gets. And together, we'll prove that our love is worth everything." And in that moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift from their shoulders. They weren't just fighting for their love. They were fighting for the freedom to choose their own paths, to live life on their own terms. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, they knew they had each other, and that was all they needed to face whatever came next. Despite the weight of the world on their shoulders, Alex and Sophie made the decision to get married. It wasn't an easy choice, and it didn't come without its share of challenges, but they knew deep in their hearts that this was the only path that truly mattered. Their love was genuine, a force that neither family nor society could control. They weren't going to let their differences stand in the way of what they had built together. They had fought for it through every obstacle, every doubt, and now they were ready to make it official. The wedding wasn't like the extravagant affairs Sophie's family had always imagined for her. It wasn't about the lavish dresses, the grand venues, or the hundreds of guests. Instead, it was a quiet, intimate celebration. Just a handful of close friends and family gathered in a small, beautiful garden. The ceremony was simple, with soft, glowing lights above them and flowers scattered along the ground. Alex wore a simple suit, nothing too fancy, just enough to make him look his best. Sophie wore a dress that wasn't from a designer label, but it was the one she had chosen because it made her feel truly herself. There were no grand speeches or extravagant gestures, just two people deeply in love committing to each other in front of the people who mattered most. As the ceremony went on, Sophie's parents, who had once opposed their relationship so fiercely, stood quietly watching the vows being exchanged. It was a slow process, this acceptance. At first, it had been hard for them to accept that their daughter was marrying someone who didn't fit their vision of who she should be with. But as they witnessed the depth of the bond, Sophie and Alex shared, something began to shift. The way Alex looked at Sophie with such tenderness and respect made her parents realize that their daughter had found someone who truly loved her for who she was. It wasn't about money or status. It was about something far more meaningful. Over time, Sophie's parents began to soften, seeing that no amount of wealth or societal expectation could replace the happiness Sophie had found in Alex. For Alex, the wedding wasn't just about uniting with the woman he loved. It was a symbol of everything they had overcome. It was a celebration of their resilience, their willingness to defy the odds and fight for what they knew was right. But it also marked a moment of reconciliation with his own doubts. For so long he had questioned whether he could ever be enough for Sophie, and now, standing beside her in front of the people they loved, he realized that he had been enough all along. The love they shared was more than enough to bridge any gap, to overcome any obstacle. Their families, who had once been at odds over the relationship, began to see things differently. Sophie's family, though slow to come around, couldn't deny the genuine love and respect Alex showed their daughter. They began to see the sincerity in his actions, his care for her, and his commitment to building a life with her. Slowly, the walls came down. The tension that had existed between the two families began to fade as they all came together to celebrate the couple's new chapter. The wedding may not have been grand, but it was beautiful in its own right. It was a testament to the fact that love, when pure and unwavering, doesn't need to follow the rules of society. It doesn't need to be defined by wealth or social status. It's about two people choosing each other despite everything working against them. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who loved them most, Alex and Sophie knew that no matter what challenges came next, they had already won. They had chosen each other. They had fought for each other. And that was all that mattered. True love doesn't care about wealth, status, or background. It's about the heart. Alex and Sophie's journey proves that love has the power to break down even the most stubborn barriers, bringing two people from completely different worlds together. Despite the challenges they faced, they chose each other, and in doing so, they built a life filled with happiness and understanding. Their story is a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected people can change your life forever, showing us that love is not bound by anything but the strength of the connection between two hearts. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Thank you for watching.